Hello and welcome to the second part in our tuning series for electronic boost control. In the last episode, we looked at how to install the boost controller, how to test it, how to plumb it up correctly for your application, and also how to use TunerStudio to determine what your min and max duty cycles are and to even test it a little bit without even turning on the car. So that's an important safety feature. So now that we've got that all out of the way, we will be able to do some tuning on the street. Good old-fashioned street tuning, which is definitely a perfectly fine way of getting this set up as long as you follow some specific safety recommendations. But first, what's the plan for today? Well, we're going to be looking at our boost control open loop duty table. So we're going to be tuning in open loop for now. And I like to do it that way, to start in open loop, because the closer you get your duty table dialed in, the better closed loop will work. So definitely get it configured in open loop first, and then in a future video we can do some closed loop tuning, which allows us to turn on PID control for it, and that will take care of various ambient conditions, which will help make sure that your boost control is perfect all the time. However, we're going to be looking at how to get your max boost target dialed in so that it's the max when you want it to be the max and it's consistently at that target. We're going to look at how to improve spool so that you get into boost pressure more quickly. And there's a couple different ways of doing that at the low ends of the table, as well as while you're just cruising. If you're cruising and then you need to make a pass, then that's another situation where you want it to spool up very quickly. And then how to make sure that you're not getting any kind of boost sag and how to deal with those type of conditions. Okay, so the first part is some safety. We want to make sure that since we're taking it out on the street, we want to warm up the car completely before you're doing any kind of pulls at all, and that our various settings are set up correctly. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we've got still enabled is our overboost protection. So set this out up to a relatively conservative number. In my case, I'm basically going to be targeting around 190 kPa as the top end. I'm actually targeting more like 180 kPa, and that we are also we have the car is going to be completely warmed up, and our boost table to begin with, we go down to boost control duty table, is completely zeroed out. And the reason for that is the first couple pulls we want to do it at wastegate pressure. We don't want the boost controller to be involved at all. As we tested in the previous video, when this is 0, that means the pressure is being sent straight to the wastegate and we're running on wastegate pressure. That's the minimum amount of boost that you can get. So we want to see what those curves look like before we even mess with this. So it's a good idea to do at least 1 or 2 pulls with this zeroed out. So we've got that set. Now, the next part is we're going to be making use of this graphing and logging screen. So this is built in to TunerStudio. It takes advantage of the graphing features. You can also, pull this out into the Megalog viewer application, which is a separate application. But in this screen, it allows you to configure things as well as tune things sort of at the same time, while you're in the car. So let's start by setting up our graphs. So here I've got set up as the white color is my boost PSI. And so you can see these are, I've got a log open. You can also, before you start and you haven't logged anything, you can just click start data logging at any time, and this will start going in real time. But our first thing is boost PSI, and so that's white. RPM is red. And TPS, our throttle position sensor, is going to be green. So this makes it really easy to read where you are in terms of when you're scrolling through this later and you're looking for your pulls. Whenever you see your TPS shoot up to the top of the screen, meaning it's going to 100%, that means you're doing a pull. So we've got those three basic things set up. You can add more, but I like to keep it somewhat simple. And then on our graph down here at the bottom, we've got AFR, so that we can keep an eye on that. As you change boost, your AFR will likely change. And depending on how good your fuel table is, you may be dipping into some lower APRs, which is AFRs, which are going to either, well, it could be too rich or too lean. And either way, it could affect your boost situation. So you want your AFRs to be on target, and that may mean tuning fuel at the same time. In fact, it almost certainly will mean tuning fuel at the same time. And it is okay to run the auto tune, the tune analyze live at the same time while doing this. That's perfectly fine. It works fine. The second thing I want to see is our boost duty, just to see what our boost tables are doing, because as we go through this, we're going to be changing this. Well, you can do this while you're doing some pulls and then come back later and do some deeper analysis of what it's telling you right here. So once you've got your graphs figured out the way you like them, we can go over here and take a look at these tables. So I think by default, the fuel table will come up, but if not, you can always change whichever tables you want by simply going in here and selecting which one you want. Maybe you want to look at, for a particular run in any given moment, your AFR table instead of fuel, so you can change that. But what I like to do is come down here to the second table and change it to boost control. So we're going to select our boost control duty table, and indeed this matches our zeroed out boost table that we set before. Now we can make changes here as well. This is not just read only, we can also make changes. And so with that, our little view here is set up and we should be ready to roll. Okay, so a couple little hints for dealing with this screen once you've got some data recorded as well is to, you can right click on something and there's such a thing called marks. Now marks occur when you're logging and you hit the spacebar. So you hit the spacebar and it's going to make a mark, and you can make a mark before every pull that you want to do. So you can skip all that sort of useless idling that you're doing on the side of the road while you're looking at your data or waiting at a light or whatever it might be. So you can skip directly to the marks. Now I haven't really done the marks, and the reason why is because it's easy to skip to various things. You can either skip to like a max RPM, that's the one spot that's a max RPM in the thing, but you can also search for various places in the map, and if you search on TPS for a specific TPS, and we search for 100 TPS, that'll take you straight to the first incidence of 100 TPS, which would be your first pull. So that's a way just to kind of navigate around your log and make it easier. You can also kind of drag and scroll it like in real time and see all these numbers change as you drove, basically. And by clicking around, you can click and it'll move this line to exactly where you want to be. And it will show you like here. So we remember white is our boost PSI. So at this little peak right here, it's saying I'm at 7.8. So that's about right. I got an 8 PSI spring. And so at max boost on 0, well, in this case, I guess I was at 20. But that will give you the basic values that you're at. And so you can jump around like that. So that's just some quick tips on how to move around your graphs and your logs. Okay, the next thing we want to do is get a feeling for what our curves look like, just as at like a basic level. And it's going to vary, per car, based on your turbo, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm doing third gear pulls. It may even be different depending on the gear you're in. But in general, it's going to look about the same. It's just going to be a different speed. But what you've got is you're going to have something that looks like this in terms of how your RPM is going up. So you're making your pull, your RPM goes up, and then at some peak, whether you're going too fast for whatever road you're on or you get to red line, you're going to drop off and your RPMs are going to go down. So this is going to be relatively stable. This is what your you know, your RPM curve is going to look like. Now, what may happen is that there's a couple different ways that your boost may react. As your RPM goes up, your boost is almost always going to rise. So it may go like this, and then it may reach a point where it peaks, and then it starts to go down. And it may level out, or instead of going leveling out, it may start dropping like this directly with RPM. Or you could even see something that looks like this. It peaks like slightly afterwards, so you're not really reaching your target when you're at your peak RPM. Or it comes up and it stays flat, and then it just starts dropping with your RPM like that. You know, there's going to be some particular variances like that. That's what you want to see, and you want to see how your car is reacting, and that tells you the kinds of things that you need to tweak to get yourself to hit that target. Now, wherever this peaks, wherever this hits, that may or may not be your target. You know, your target may be up here. You may want your boost. This may, when you look at your graph, this may be 5 psi, and you want 10 psi. So this just means that because it's not reaching your target, you need to hold that wastegate closed. You need to not send more pressure, which allows it to continue on to get up to your target and stay there. Okay. So back over on the graph itself, we see a similar curve. We've got our RPM going up as we make our pull. That's usually a steady upward trend like this. And we see that our boost follows it, and it gets up here, and I can just click to get right here on the peak. Peaks at about 7.2-ish, 7.3. But then when it gets to 7.3, it starts going down. And then when the RPMs drop, then the boost falls almost immediately. We're in, you know, overrun or something. We put in the clutch. The exhaust gases are no longer flowing. We've got possibly fuel cut because of you know, deceleration. So it drops off immediately. So it's this, and you can even kind of zoom in on what this looks like in here, that we're trying to tweak. So this is basically our so at 20% duty cycle, we're not really holding this closed. And so what we're doing is we're not quite reaching our target. Let's say our target is 10. Don't really get too caught up in the numbers. Just say our target is more like up here. We're not hitting our target, and it's decreasing as RPMs continue to increase. So what we want this to be is to hit our target a little sooner, and we want it to be flat going across here until we let off. So the idea would be to make this a little bit steeper so that it jumps up and hits our target, and then it stays there. So the way to handle this type of tuning is sort of the opposite of the way we did fueling. When we did fueling, we started sort of at the bottom. We started with idling just to make sure our fuel was correct at idle. And then we did some street tuning with auto tune, and we got our tuning in here in the lower part of the map below 100 kPa, so no boost. And then with boost tuning, we slowly worked ourselves up and went up to the higher portions of the map, one row at a time, basically, dialing in our tunings, our AFRs, so that we stayed within our target, which maxed out at around about 11.8 AFR, say. And we worked our way from the bottom to the top. Here what we're doing is, on wastegate pressure, we're sort of working our way from the top down. And the reason we do that is it's a safety thing. So at wastegate pressure, that's the max boost that we can do. And what we want to do is slowly dial in our top row at wide open throttle. And then that's the most boost that we're ever going to see in effect on this table. And so by slowly working these duty cycles up at the higher end of our TPS, then we're going to be able to dial in the top end and then work our way down. Okay, so I updated this table to match what's on here. We've got our boost duty at 30, and so at 30, it's getting pretty close. So we're getting kind of close to where we want to be in terms of our targets here at the top of the table. Now, what does it do basically every single time? Well, it peaks a little early before we get to the, well, peaking early is fine, but it also starts to go down before we get to the end of the run. We'd like to have this a little flatter. Now this isn't horrible, but the way to flatten this out is that as the RPMs rise, we want to change our curve here so that this rises as well. So here we are at 3,900 RPM and we're reaching 9.2 PSI, which is pretty decent, honestly. 3,900 RPM, that's pretty low RPM. You can see with a small turbo, you know, even at 3,400 RPM, we're making 4.8 pounds. And say like right here, when we first, just a few milliseconds really after we go into wide open throttle, you know, we're already into boost. So we're making almost 1 PSI. It's almost as soon as we smash that throttle. And then like just a little while later, and you can see how long it takes by looking down here. You know, a half a second. So within a half a second, we're making a couple PSI, and then a few seconds after that, we're up to our max boost. So that's not bad, but we don't want it to drop. And we possibly could even improve this a little bit. So by looking at where we are in the RPM scale, so here we're at the 4,400 range. So anywhere like about 4,000, 4,400, so on. At this pull, we didn't get that far. So for these cells, and it's likely to continue that trend as we go up, we want to increase this. So for this, we might want to make this 32. And because it continues to drop as we get lower, then we may want to increase this one to compensate. So 36, 37, and until we get to wide open throttle, we actually get to red line. We can just flatten that out. We'll just see how that works. So that's how you get your curve at the top. And so what that does is it's going to flatten out this boost curve. So that's going to be nice and flat. Now on this particular pull, I noticed that our AFRs are dropping down. That's way too low. We should never really go below 11.5 on this with this particular map. So this is getting pretty low. That means we've got some fuel tuning to do. So on another pull, we'll want to see that continue to stay flat somewhere in here. You know, in the 11.8 to 12-ish range is good. But the next thing we want to do is look at how we can make sure that we don't have any sag at the beginning here, that the turbo is always ready to spool as quickly as possible. So in looking at your particular car, you want to look and see what is the RPM that the boost starts to come on. And you have to be a little careful with this because it's gonna vary a little bit based on gear, because of at the lower gears you're gonna have a lot more load and on the engine, so it's gonna automatically produce a little bit more with that. But on average, what we can do is tell the boost controller to stay closed at everything below 2,000 RPM. So we'll set that to 100. And that's going to keep it closed like it's not seeing any boost whatsoever. And it probably isn't, but so this is a relatively conservative amount. On this particular car, we could probably go to like 2,800. And you can do that simply by changing these cells, and you can dial it in for your particular car. I'm just going to leave it like this because it's already boosting fairly quickly. And this curve is probably pretty close to what I want. In fact, let me change this to 32. Okay. So, given our RPM, we're keeping the boost valve closed, so it's not sending any pressure to the wastegate. Therefore, the wastegate is not opening at all. We'd also like, at low throttle positions, to keep it closed. And the reason we do that is to help make sure that we're not losing any additional spool. And this is especially helpful after a pull. Like after you make a pull, and then like suppose you're in a racing condition, well, you make a pull, you slow down because of a corner, and then you're making a pull. You know, so you don't want to be losing out on a lot of boost that's in here just because you lifted and it let all your spool go away. So instead, when we lift at these low levels, and it could be the first couple rows or the first 3 rows. I'm just going to do the first couple rows, but I'm also going to lock that out. Okay, so that's going to make it so that we're not losing anything all the way across the board here when we lift. Okay, so we got the top of our map figured out, and it's getting pretty close to where we want it to be in terms of our targets. We've got the edges over here, the left and the bottom, figured out, and that helps us get spool when we need it. And now we've just got the middle. So the middle is kind of where we're going to be cruising. So somewhere in here, we're going to be sort of cruising, depending on how fast we're cruising or what gear we're cruising in. That's going to be these throttle positions and these RPMs. So at this point, we don't want to make the numbers too high. All we want to do is make it so that we can have quick spool. And you know, the reason for that is these numbers are just a means to an end. We just want to get our boost up to our target so that we can make power. When do we want power? When we ask for it, by pressing on the go pedal right here. And if I'm not asking for power, then I don't need power. There's no reason for this to be in boost for no reason. So, and certain parts of this map, like in here, you're only going to be passing through very, very quickly. So you're going to be transitioning through this with over a course of a second. So it almost doesn't even matter what's in these cells. But over in here, where you say you might be cruising, you know, especially like right in here. This center of your map is where you might be, you know, blipping the throttle and wanting to get back on boost, out of boost, back on boost, you know, and so on, depending on what kind of driving you're doing. So to do that, we want to be in a situation where we're actually cruising in some of the higher RPMs, and that means kind of going on the highway. So here I've got a part of our log where we're sort of cruising here. We're about to do a pull just to get on the highway. And you can see it's the same old thing. In this case, it's our boost duty is now at 32, which doesn't match our table, but at the time that's what it was. And our AFRs are pretty much in line, so that's not bad. But as we come out of the pool, we are at a higher RPM. So we're still cruising, we're at a higher speed at this point, and we're cruising on the highway. So it's at this point where if I'm on the highway and I want to do a pull like this, then I want that boost to be more or less immediately on tap. And so it sort of is. If I highlight this area and look at it over, 2.8 seconds, we're getting sort of all of our boost, but I think we can do better than that. And so what we can do is at this cruising RPM, we can actually set down in here, instead of being at like a 0% boost duty cycle, we can change this to be like a partial amount. So if we were to set all this to about 20, which is still mostly open, it's not really doing very much, but it's giving us a little bit of help. And so through a couple of extra pulls after this, we may work this up just a tad, but that'll help improve this curve right here. So making this go up just a little bit faster and staying there, you know, being maybe right in here instead of right there. All right, so this is what we got. You know, it's now getting fairly close. And if you look at this curve, it's looking pretty good. It's going fairly quickly to about our target, not quite, but it's in this particular pull at least. And it's staying relatively flat. There's only about a half a PSI to 1 PSI drop here. So we might be able to dial that in just a little bit, you know, with these cells up in here. And then our AFRs are good, and you can see how our boost duty is helping us. It's staying at our duty here so that it is keeping it nice and flat. And then we have a drop, but not too big of a drop. And then it basically goes to 100% because at this point the boost is dropping off completely, and we want to be ready for the next pull. All right, so with that, we have our table pretty much done. So this is configured for open loop. Obviously, the next steps have to do with configuring it so that it will work under more conditions, like if it's hot outside, really cold outside, you know, different types of things, different elevations and stuff, and that's called closed loop tuning for your boost control table. And the other thing that you can get into after this is by bringing into account what your vehicle speed is. You know, I mentioned several times, it's like depending on where you are, like what gear you're in or what speed you are, you may want it to perform in different ways. And so that's what you can do, is you can configure it to work with different boost level by gear or by speed, and really the sky is the limit. You can change it to be whatever you want, but that will be coming up in we'll probably do that in a future video. That will wrap it up for today with this basic open loop boost duty control table. Let me know if you have any questions. I read all the comments. I appreciate it, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, everybody.